I love flies with interesting names, such as this one, the Diablo Rojo or Red Devil. Join me at my fly tying bench. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Hi everyone, I'm Phil Rowley and welcome to my YouTube channel and to my fly tying bench. Today I'm going to tie you the Diablo Rojo. This fly was introduced to me by my guide Martin on my last trip down to Argentina and the famed Lago Strobel or Jurassic Lake. It was a fly that had South African origins. He showed it to me and I wanted to tie it right away. It's nothing more than a really neat variation of a pheasant tail, but if you ever get down to Argentina, perhaps join me on one of my hosted trips. You're going to want to make sure you have a few of these stowed in your fly box. So let's get to my bench. I'll show you how to tie it. So let's tie the Diablo Rojo, Spanish for Red Devil. So into the vise, I've got a size 10, 1760. You could probably tie this in 8, but this is a fly I was introduced to by my guide Martin in Argentina. And red, those big Lago Strobel trout, they do like a little red on their flies. It's a good color combination to have with you. And if you ever want to go down to Lago Strobel, Jurassic Lake, or join me, check the links in the description for information on the trips I do down there each year. Maybe one day you can join me down there. So onto the hook, I've slid a 1/8 tungsten bead, red, and then using some red tying thread. You can also use black. These are the tungsten beads I use. 1/8 inch. You could certainly use brass, but down in Argentina, with the wind that the region is famous for, and the wind-induced current, having a little tungsten to get your flies down quickly, and especially if you're casting to sighted fish, you'd want to have that as well. So the Diablo Rojo is essentially a pheasant tail nymph with a little red added to it in strategic locations. So for the tail and the body and the wing case, we are going to use black pheasant tail. So, and if you can, you want to try and get your pheasant tail with long fibers. This one isn't the longest fibered pheasant tail you're ever going to see, so I'm going to have to tie in the body and the tail and the wing case and legs. Probably each one is separate applications, but we'll see. If you get a really long fibered tail, then you can tie your tail and body in one section and another section for your wing case and legs. So we're going to tie in the tail. We want our tail about half the shank length long. So I'm just going to bring my thread down just in front of the hook point. I'm going to take my tail about half the shank length, couple of wraps to lock it in, to get it in place. Take my fingers away and eyeball it and say, is that tail going to stick out long enough? I think it is. Maybe pull on it a little bit. And then once I'm happy with obviously the position of the materials and the length of the tail, then I'll just secure that red thread all the way down to about halfway between the point and the crushed down barb, and then come forward, walking this up to build a nice smooth foundation for my underbody. I can even go right up to the bead, fold these ends back. This will help build up some bulk in the thorax, and then I come in and trim the extra butts off here. For the ribbing, it's got 2 ribs on this fly. First one is a reinforcing rib we're going to tie in. This is small ultra wire in red. So we're just going to take a section of wire, bind that in place on the near side of the shank, move forward and then back to the base of the tail and secure this in right to the base. And then for the little bit of flash, more flash, we're going to use, get that orientated right for you, some Krinkle mirror flash. I love using this for ribbing on flies. It's thin, it's a subtle rib, but it's got a little, packs a little shine to it, which is what we want. So we're just going to take a length of this and secure it in, like so. And I'm going to take another section of the black pheasant. I'm going to pull it off, isolate, I don't know, 6 to 8 fibers or so. Trim those from the stem. And then we're going to come in and tie them in by the tips. I'm going to trim the tips even. Come right back. I don't want to tie in too much of the material because I don't have the longest. This feather I've chosen doesn't have long fibers, so obviously I don't want to lose any length or get stuck in a situation where I'm winding up and I run out of material. So I'm going to try and wind these forward up to about the 3/4 point. So I'm just going to build up a little bit of taper in the body here. I don't want this super thick and robust, but a little bit of taper wouldn't hurt. I'm going to put a little coating of super glue. I'm going to wind that pheasant over top of that, add durability. I'm going to have my hackle pliers handy, just in case I run out of room here and have trouble holding everything. So I have those, just these rotating, they're nearby. And we're actually going to counter wind this body over. I love to do this with any pheasant tail bodied fly, over the super glue, and then when I put the ribbing over it, it's going to have a crisscross effect and add additional reinforcement. So I'm just winding this up. I think at this point I'm going to come in, try to grasp all of these fibers with my rotating hackle pliers, and whoops, just wind these forward. One wrap slightly in front of the other. You can overlap them a little bit and build some taper. See if I can squeeze one more wrap out here. Lost one fiber, that's not the end of the world. Tie that off. Even get that one encouraged to come with the rest of them. And then we're just going to come in and push my bobbin out of the way and trim off those remnants, like so. And we're going to take our crystal flash rib, not crystal flash, sorry, crinkle mirror flash. And we're actually going to counterwind that too. And just, again, we're not trying to segment, we're just trying to add a little bit of flash to this. Wrap over top, all the way down and around up to our thread. Tie that off. And then we're going to find our red wire. And then we're going to wind this sort of traditional over the top. And the combination of that super glue underneath the pheasant tail and wrapping the rib, the reinforcing red wire rib, and the black pheasant tail in opposite directions creates that crisscross reinforcing effect. And just add a little bit of durability to your fly. You can do this anytime you're tying pheasant tail, whether it's a chironomid body or a traditional pheasant tail, or this one, a Diablo Rojo. So we've got the body in place. For the wing case, to keep going with the red theme, we're going to add a little bit of, in this case, holographic red tinsel. You could also just use regular non-holographic red tinsel if you want. I just love the holographics. So we're just going to take a section of this, move the tying thread forward, and lay that on top like so, and wind that back onto the body slightly, and then come forward. See if we can push that out of the way. I'm going to bring my material clip forward a little bit, see if I can just get that in there. There we go. That's out of the way. Now, one of the problems I've always had with pheasant tails, and I'm sure others have too, is getting your your leg length consistent. So one of the best ways to do this, and this pheasant tail fiber has enough length to it. I'm just going to take another slip out, like so, and pull some of the fibers out. There's probably 10 to 15 fibers in there. And rather than kind of tie in your shell, try and factor in your wing case and your legs in all one length, I'm actually going to tie in the legs first. I want my legs to sweep back along the side, so they're about half the shank length long. So I'm going to tie them in place on top of the shank, directly behind the bead, like so. And then I'm just going to secure these back onto the body, and the butts, don't trim them, they're going to be used for my wing case. And then the thorax is, you could use Peacock curl, or I'm going to use some ice dub here, regular Peacock, or in this case Peacock black. You could use any sort of dubbing, even one with a little bit of red in it. We'll keep going with the theme, but this works pretty good. And then we just pull the thread down, and we're just going to, it's a coarse dubbing, so good firm thread pressure, finger pressure. Moistening your fingers a little bit, spinning in one direction, and just twisting that around. And don't use too much dubbing. You can always add more, but if you try and twist too much on, particularly with these coarse dubbings like ice dub, and if you have access to it, seal's fur, you can always add more dubbing. But if you try to spin too much on at once, it starts giving you problems. So we're just going to start winding that dub thread, and we're just going to wind that forward, back and forth a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit more just to get my thread from the midpoint on the thorax to where it needs to be on the behind the bead. Pack that in. Build up a robust thorax if you wish. And now we're going to take, I'm going to turn this a little bit so you can see, I'm just going to take and just roughly divide those two, the tips of the feathers I've got there, into two roughly equal clumps. You don't have to start counting individuals, but you can try and spread them out so you have equal amounts on either side. And what I'm going to do is, my thread is right at the bead. I'm going to take the clump on the far side and just sort of weave my thread through, wind back a couple of wraps, and that'll tuck those legs right along the side. Bring the thread forward again, and then grab the clump that's going to go down the near side of the shank, the side closest to you on the camera. And I've hold those in place and wind back on them to secure them down the sides like so. The wing case coming through is going to help divide them too. But then I've got every time I tie a pheasant tail, or in this case a Diablo Rojo, I'm going to have those legs all the same length. I'll trim a few of these errant fibers. Now we're just going to finish the wing case, and basically the fly will be done. So we're just going to bring over that black pheasant tail and then tie that down, hold our legs in place like so. Hold them back. I got one leg that just refuses to go, so we'll just be more patient than that leg is. Tie that down, a couple wraps in front to lock it. Trim that nice and flush. Then we're going to bring our holographic mylar right over the top, like so. You can see that nice red back complements the bead. A couple over the top, a couple in front. Nip that out of the way, and then we're just going to spin our bobbin counterclockwise for some nice flat wraps. Pull this down, build up a little bit of a little red thread behind the bead. And the last thing we're going to do is put a little bit of, this is optional but adds a little bit of durability. We're just going to put some resin on top of that wing case. So I'm going to the errant strands out of the way, but you want kind of a ratty looking nymph. And then we're just going to come in. This is Solara's medium viscosity resin. Pull that in focus there. You could use thick if you want as well. I'm just going to squeeze this out carefully out of the bottle. A little air bubble there. And we're just going to put a nice coating of this resin right on the bead, back of the bead and the thorax. Use my dubbing needle to distribute that around. You can even pull it back off the wing case onto the shell back as well and let that settle out. That looks good. Take my UV light, come in and give it a quick cure. I'll lock it up, and there you have it, the completed Diablo Rojo, Red Devil. Thanks to my guide at Stancha Laguna Verde, Martin, for introducing me to this fly. This was, I believe, he was introduced to it by some South African guests. So it's a, go to Argentina, you want to have some flies with a splash of red, and you can fish this fly cast and retrieved with little strips or hang it under an indicator. It works equally well. And if it works in Argentina, I'm pretty sure it'll work on your waters too. So consider adding some of these to the pheasant tail section in your fly box.